Hi guys, Steve here. Really excited to announce a new product that we have coming out very shortly here. It's called our Synthrotek DSM module for the Eurorack synthesizer system. It is a full analog, 1 volt per octave tracking drum synth. It's also a complete little synth voice that you can mess around with. And it's very useful, very complete. It's got a lot of beef behind it in 8 HP, and I'm really excited to showcase it for you guys here today. Okay, so before we get into the front panel here and the controls here on the front, let's talk about what's on the back. We've got 2 trim pots here. The larger of the trim pots is 25 turn trim pot, affects the 1 volt per octave tracking that the DSM can achieve. Now it can only achieve 1 volt per octave tracking between C0 and C4, but it does give you a nice little range there. Anything above that won't track as well with your 1 volt per octave keyboard or other control voltage source. The trim pot up top here is for the attack, and basically as you adjust this, it allows you to either have a quicker or shorter attack. The shorter attack gets a more poppy sound when the trigger of the input trigger is hit on the front here of the DSM, but you can also set it so it's a little softer and it's a little shorter attack so that there's not quite the same amount of pop when it receives a trigger. Okay, so first here on the front we have our sensitivity knob. Below that is a mix knob, and that's actually mixing in the amount of onboard noise that we have into the circuit, which is great for cymbals, snares, hi-hats, all sorts of various auxiliary percussion. Up here we have our LFO rate, which is going to be the speed of the LFO. That's onboard as well. We have the LFO amount, which is below that, so that's how much the LFO is going to be coming into our initial oscillation. We also have below that a sweep knob, and that controls what pitch that the drum will initially start at and then drop down to our bass oscillator frequency. So that's great for creating normal, natural sounding percussion. Also the VCO here, that's where we kind of set between 6 Hertz and 25 kilohertz as far as the range goes on that. And then below that we have our decay, which is, manual decay, like the manual attack on the back, which allows you to manually set how long you want your drum sound to sustain before it cuts off to 0. So over here below the mix pot we have the color, and that also is part of our noise circuit on board here, and there's 3 different capacitor values we have on board in this product, and this allows you to choose between all 3 different capacitors, which give you different noise color or timbres for your noise. Below that is the trigger input, which takes triggers or gates. There is an LED above this that lets you know it basically turns on when it receives a trigger signal, and will also grow in illuminance the higher the voltage input there is on that trigger. Below that is our CV input, which is control voltage input. It allows us to use 1 volt per octave tracking as long as we calibrate it properly according to the manual and whatnot that's going to be included with this module. You also can use, it can go higher than the 1 volt per octave tracking, but again, it only tracks between C0 and C4. But this allows for control voltage input, which really is really cool because it allows you to do drum fills and things that you normally couldn't do with just one drum voice. Output here, standard output, 3.5 millimeter in module level. Well, that's enough of me explaining the features here. Let's get over to the modular and see how this thing actually works.
Okay, hey, this is Steve again, and we're now showing you what the DSM sounds like and how it works in practicality. A couple different ways you can use this is you can use it as a monosynth if you want to use like a QuNexus or something with your gate output and your CV output plugged into the trigger input and the CV input. You can use it that way, and it ends up being like a little monosynth. You can also use it as a drum synth. You can use it as an LFO for other things within your module if you want to do FMing or various things. So let's show the 2 main ways, which are going to be using it with a keyboard or using it as a drum synth with triggers. So right now I've got my Keith McMillan QuNexus, which I love, hooked up here to the DSM, and as I said before, I've got the gate output and going into the trigger input, and I've got the CV output going into the CV input. So if I push a note here on my QuNexus, as you can hear, so as long as I hold it down, and also I have to make sure that I have the sensitivity turned up. If I turn the sensitivity down and I hit a note, you're not going to get anything, which is what I'm doing right now. So we got to turn this up so that it's a little more sensitive to that input gate. So as you can see, we can play a little scale. And this particular DSM has been calibrated properly, so it is 1 volt per octave, and it is functioning as such. So let's just go through the controls on here. The sensitivity when I'm using the trigger input here. Now, if I unplug the trigger, because it's got some internal DC offset that basically brings open the VCA completely, and that's if you want to use a keyboard with like an envelope and a VCA. If you don't want to use the onboard VCA. So first thing is we want to turn it up. I've got it turned up to about 3 o'clock. Down below here is the mix, which mixes some noise into the circuit, and the color switch here has 3 different types of color noise. So let's leave it in the middle and turn this up a little bit and see what that sounds like. So as you can hear as well, there's some noise. Let's try the 2 other types of noise. And if we don't want like that much noise, we can kind of turn it down and barely just a little bit here. You can have that, or you can have a lot of noise. It can be mostly noise. It's playing it like a keyboard. Let's change it down here to the other kind of noise. And that's kind of what we're using as a keyboard. So let's turn this off just so we can hear the notes a little better. The next area we're going to want to get to, we're going to want to show here is the decay. So I basically have the decay turned all the way down. So what's going to happen is immediately as I lift my finger off the keyboard, the sound's going to go away. So if I'm holding it down right now and I let go, basically it's a really, really short decay. So let's turn this up, and I will show you what it sounds like when we've got a long decay. Okay, all the way up. Okay, so as you can see, there's like an onboard VCA already built in, so you don't have to use another VCA, you don't have to use another envelope, you can just use what's already going on here. Another thing we can do too is if you want it to stay 1 volt per octave, we're not going to want to turn the VCO knob much, but if we do, if we don't really care, if we want to get past C4, then we can definitely crank that up and start messing with our keyboard. So like I said, it only works in 1 volt per octave from C0 to C4. The sweep gives us our initial frequency, which is going to be higher than the VCO frequency. So let's turn that up a little bit and hear what that sounds like. Well, let's also turn up our decay a little bit so we can hear how that sounds a little more, little kind of disco or lasery. And let's turn down this a little more. Longer decay with our sweep. Let's turn the sweep a lot more. So some real analog drum sounds there with the sweep, but it also can emulate just the sound of a mechanical tom or a bass drum or something like that. That's going to be higher when you first hit it. Also, as you can see here, we have our LFO amount, which let's put a little bit of LFO in the amount. It's at a slow rate. Let's hear how that sounds. See, it's modulating it there. Let's bring a little more up into our circuit here. A lot more drastic, isn't it? Let's also increase the rate. Let's turn the amount down a little bit so it doesn't totally destroy our pitch. And as we crank this all the way up, we get our bell noises as well as some ring midi sounds. Let's hear what that sounds like. Interesting note. So, like I said, you can play this thing just like a mono synth that has a built-in LFO, built-in noise circuit, built-in sweep, and a built-in decay. So it's a triangle core tracking oscillator that is an 8 HP that can be, like I said, just used as as a little key. You can have really short decay, or you can have really long decays. So real fun for that. You can use multiple of these if you want to have multiple voices in your system. Anyway, a lot of fun. Use it with just a keyboard. Use a MIDI CV keyboard. Use a QuNexus or whatever works best for you, but works great as a little mono synth. Okay, so one other way that we can use the DSM with a keyboard is to not put our trigger input into the DSM and rather put this into an envelope, and then also use a VCA and then patch the output into a VCA, and you'll be able to have the full control of a standard ADSR or whatever you have for an envelope, instead of just the attack and decay phases that we have here on our DSM. What I really want to show you is how the DSM also works with a drum trigger. I am using the MFB SEQ1 because it does a real good job at giving me like a 909 or 808 style drum sequencer. And so what I have here is I've got our sequence 8 that is giving us our clock. The clock output of that is going into a buffered mult. That is then going into the clock input on the SEQ1. And then I have different triggers. So let's grab a patch cable or two. First of all, let's plug into the output. Now I'll leave the sensitivity down for now because if I turn it on before I get a trigger, I'm just going to have, it's going to drone there by itself. So it's kind of waiting for a trigger at this point. So let's take a patch cable. Let's grab it out of our bass drum here, pop it into the trigger input. Again, I don't have anything into the CV input right now. And we're just going to kind of emulate a bass drum sound right now. And let's turn this up a little bit, turn up the rate so we can get this thing going. And each time this hits, if I turn the sensitivity up, it's pretty low. So every time that I've got a step here, trigger, now I can set my decay really low, or really low, excuse me, or I can roll short. I can also change my sweep here to give me a little different kind of bass drum sound. So I've added more triggers coming out of my here. You can even get more sweep. More analog-y drum sounds. Let's make it really, really short decay. Add a little bit of noise into there. So based upon the mix here of the noise into the circuit, based also on the decay, and also the color of the noise, it's going to change the timbre. Really, really tight. Let's put a little noise in there. A little longer decay. So, you can get a lot of various different bass drum sounds. Let's also try to change, let's also add a little LFO into that mix to see what that sounds like. It's going to get a little weirder, but it's definitely fun in its own right. So a little more, bring the noise out. Let's bring up the LFO, the oscillator a little bit. Add a little bit of LFO. A little noise to that. Turn the VCO down a little bit. A little metallic pluck there with a little noise. Okay, let's stop that. Let's now add in some CV, some control voltage from the Synthrotek Sequence 8 sequencer, step sequencer. And I'm going to turn the output attenuator up, put in the CV, and I'm going to turn down the VCO, turn down the sweep a little bit, just so we can get a good range in there, starting from low to high. So let's start our drum trigger here again and see kind of what the CV does to things. So you can change around to make different kind of sounds as you're playing a drum, as well as give you different kind of sounds. Maybe a tom, maybe you're filling in with some rototoms or whatever kind of works for the drum sound you want to have. But changing the CV in there adds a lot of different variants. So if you want to get weird, you can longer decay times, kind of coupled with LFOs. Kind of like that right there. And of course, you can add in any kind of control voltage source you want. You want to put an envelope in there, an LFO. There's various ways of controlling what the control voltage will do and the pitches that you'll achieve. So, I mean, you can get a wide variety. I'm also going to have some more demos down the line that show all the different types of sounds that you can actually achieve out of this. And pretty much you can make a full kit. The next part of the video that I'm going to have is showing us 4 of these using one of my drum sequencers, and basically that being the only noise-producing source. Going to be these 4 DSMs, and kind of show you some more of the complicated sounds and full kits that we can get out of this audibly. So stay tuned. Drones too, and some kind of crazy space synth. But right now we're going to focus mostly on using this with the drum sequencer itself. So except for this last drum here, we are going to plug in triggers from 4 different drum triggers here coming out of the SEQ1. And we're going to kind of see how that works. So we've got a snare drum, bass drum, some typical types of sounds coming out of here. But we're also going to make some atypical kinds of sounds as well. Not very color-coded. Just kind of going with what I have. That's what's in front of me. So let's start building some drums here. Hear how it sounds. So as you can see, when I plug all the trigger inputs in here, the lights go off because now they're waiting for a trigger input. I'm going to turn the sensitivity to all about 3 o'clock, so they're all about the same volume. And we're not going to hear anything coming out of that until we actually get a trigger coming in. So we haven't started yet. Turn the rate down a little bit. We're going to, most of these drums don't have anything in them right now, except for one of them. Except for 2 of them, I should say. I'm going to get a little crazy and just start doing some things, okay? So just pay attention. input going into all the drums except for the bass drum. Of course, this is just one of many different drum patches you can get out of this. And this is just kind of a short intro. We're going to hopefully do some more in-depth stuff too, but you can accomplish almost any synthesized drum sound out of a combination of using the controls and the DSM. So really excited to get it out. It's going to be $175 retail and $99 for a kit. And I think it's going to be one of the best priced drum modules out there for the amount of power and things you can actually do with it. So thanks for checking it out.